This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform where you can create your own website.
Now, this office area is really starting to take shape. I'm in love with my new desk and everything is starting to look much nicer. But there is still one thing missing. You see, in a lot of my projects, I make small stuff like these small flower pots or small bonsai animals. And I've even made a Baby Yoda piggy bank. But after I'm done with these projects, I don't have anywhere to put them. I just end up placing them in random spots around the workshop. So in this video, we're gonna fix that. Since you've already clicked on this video, you know what we're gonna build. We're gonna build some floating shelves that are gonna go on the wall right behind me here. I've already roughly marked out where I want the shelves to go on the wall here. I want one long shelf and then two smaller ones. Now, I want these shelves to be what is called floating shelves. That means that there's no visible brackets or fixtures to hold them up. So the end result is preferably gonna look like just as if you took a piece of wood and glued it onto the wall like this. Now we can obviously not just glue the piece of wood to the wall and expect it to hold any sort of weight, so we're gonna have to get a little bit creative. So let me show you what my plan is and then we can start building. So I've got this ash board left over from when we built our desk, and I'm gonna make the shelves out of this thing. Now, I don't need the shelves to be super deep since I'm just gonna have a few decorative items on top of them. So I'm gonna make them roughly half the depth of this board, which means that we're gonna get two full lengths of this board to play with to make the shelves, which is gonna be perfect for the one long and two short shelves that we're gonna make. Now, like I said, I want these shelves to be floating shelves, and to make my life even harder, I want them to be really thin. So I want them to be only one single thickness of this 20mm board. So we're gonna have to figure out some way of holding them securely against the wall with only 20mm to work with. Now, my solution for this is gonna be some M12 threaded rod, which I'm planning on screwing into the wall. And then I'm gonna drill some 12mm holes in the back of all the shelves. And then hopefully, if everything is aligned properly, I can just slide the shelves onto the all thread. And to test if this is actually gonna work, we can take a 2x4, which also are inside the walls. I'll just clamp that in my vise right here. Then I'll use a 10mm drill bit and I'll drill a hole straight through that 2x4. And now I can take these pieces of all thread that I've screwed onto nuts on one of the ends and tighten them up against each other so that I can use a socket and screw this into that hole we just drilled. Now we can back off the nuts again. Definitely don't need that tape. Now, in theory, that's all we need because this thing is really strong and it's gonna be plenty strong enough with a couple of these to hold our tiny little shelves in place. Now, the reason why this works so well and works without anything fancy like tapping threads inside of the 2x4 is a combination of the wood being soft enough to where the all thread can cut its own threads and drilling the right sized hole. You see, this M12 thread usually needs a 10mm hole drilled before you tap it with a proper tap, like one of these guys. But since the wood is so soft, the all thread itself can do all the tapping. So this entire project is actually gonna be relatively easy. There's only a couple of things that are really important to get right. One is that we need to drill the holes into the wall in the right place so that we actually end up drilling into the 2x4s and not just into a couple layers of plasterboard. Luckily, in my case, that is gonna be pretty easy since I built this wall myself and I made a video about it, so if I'm in doubt, I can just go back, watch that video and figure out where the posts are. The second thing that is really important to get right is to drill all these holes straight and in the right locations. Now, that is why I got this really long drill bit. That is so that I can make a jig to help me align the drill properly so that we drill the holes straight into the wall, and also so that we can drill this relatively large and really deep hole into this really thin piece of wood. Now, let's start by cutting this ash board into the individual shelves. We're also gonna do something really cool to make those shelves look even better, but we'll worry about them once we have them on the wall. Right, and that is all three shelves cut. The next step now is to start drilling some holes in both the shelves and the wall. And I am actually gonna start with drilling holes in the wall. And to do that, I'm gonna use a couple of scrap pieces of MDF to build myself a little jig. Now, this whole contraption is gonna be super simple. I'll just take two scrap pieces of MDF and one more that is gonna face against the wall. These two I'll glue together like this. And now this way I can use these two surfaces and rest my drill bit up against them to make sure that the hole ends up being perfectly square to the wall. So with just a little bit of super glue, a scrap piece to make sure to align this thing properly, and then just to help it be a little bit more stable, we'll add in this one as well. A little bit extra super glue has never hurt anybody. And ta-da! Our drill guide is finished. Now it's time to try this thing out. But before we do that, I want to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. So as you probably know, I quite often make videos about projects where I 3D print stuff or I build furniture. And I really want to be able to share the plans and 3D files with you guys. That's why I really love Squarespace. Squarespace enabled me to super quickly and easily create my own website where I'm now able to share my projects with you guys. It is super easy to set up. You don't need to have any technical knowledge. You can just choose from any of their award-winning templates and get started creating your own website right away. There's also no limit to how many products you can list on your site. So I'm not only able to sell the plans and 3D files for my projects, but I also have a bunch of really cool 3D files that you guys can download for free. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that you can use to create your own website. They have a bunch of really great built-in tools to handle everything from inventory, sales, shipping, and analytics. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/ALCH for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So let's try this thing out and drill some holes. All right, so let's try these out. Now to make sure that all the shelves end up perfectly straight and in the right place, I redid my tape lines here, but this time around I used a laser level to make sure that all of them are perfectly level. I also went back and had a look at when I built this wall so that I can figure out exactly where the studs are in the wall and I can plan out my shelves with that in mind. I've marked up all the center locations for all the studs, so the plan now is to just drill a hole in each one of these markings. I've also gone ahead and glued on another piece of scrap MDF just to make it even easier to drill a straight hole. And that should pretty much be it. Let's just drill a bunch more holes and then see if I can thread in some all thread. All right, that wasn't so bad. It's now time to see if we can thread in one of these threaded rods. Screw this in. Ha 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 ha. Now we can back off the nuts again. Oh, that's pretty cool, isn't it? Now, if I did this right, we should now have these rods be perfectly 90 degrees to the wall. Hey, that's not bad. I'll take it. All right, we've got all the locations for our holes marked on our shelves, and the way I ended up doing it is actually super easy. All I did was measure in from the side and mark the first location for where the first hole needs to be. I then laid the shelf flat up against the wall and used my little carpenter square to line up this side of the stud with the mark that I just made. And once the first mark is lined up, all you need to do is move over to the other studs and make a mark in the same location using this square. That way you don't need to do any measuring and you're absolutely sure that all the holes end up in the right place. At least I hope so. All that's left to do now is transfer those marks onto the short side of our shelves and mark the center. Now, if anything, it is even more important that we drill those holes into the shelves perfectly straight. Not only to make sure that the shelves actually end up straight on the wall, but also we have so little to work with here that it's really easy to drill out through one of the sides. I already know that the table of this drill press is perfectly square to the drill itself. We made sure of that when we restored this whole thing. Go check out that video if you haven't seen it yet. So all we need now is some way of holding this thing straight relative to the table. Luckily, we've already made this really oversized hole drilling jig, which just so happens to be square. So all we gotta do is clamp this guy on like this, and we've got our entire setup ready to drill some holes. Also, to make sure that the holes end up perfectly straight, I'm gonna start drilling the holes with this really nicely ground and much shorter wood drill, and then we'll finish drilling the holes to depth with this really long, awkward one. And now for this long one, here, let me show you why I love that drill press. I can actually lower the table here so that I can use my big workbench as a support to keep everything super nice and straight. Now, to drill the holes the rest of the way, my plan is to actually just drill the rest of the depth by hand. And I think that's gonna be totally fine because we already have such a deep hole to guide us the rest of the way. think that worked just fine. Let's have a look at what these shelves would look like on the wall. Now, I've already attached one of these to the studs here, and I have to say, the whole thing is really, really sturdy. Now, shoving this thing onto the wall was super easy, but because of all those little threads that kind of grip onto the wood, it's gonna be kind of a pain to get back off. So before I do that with this one that has 4 studs, I wanna put some finishing touches on it. You see, I'm gonna do the same thing that I've done with my office table and basically all the other tables I built in the past. I am gonna put a really shallow chamfer in the front here to make the shelf look even thinner than it actually is. So normally the steepest angle you can cut on a table saw like this is 45 degrees. But for these shelves, I want an even steeper angle of 70 degrees. Now, in order to do that, I need to stand the board up on its side. That way, I only need to tilt the blade over 20 degrees to achieve the 70-degree angle. Unfortunately, that means that we'll run into a problem. When we tilt the blade over like this, we need to cut our board on this side. That means that we would end up cutting into our guide. Now, we don't want to do that. So, I've cut this strip of MDF, which I'm going to clamp onto my shelf using a couple of these clamps. That way, instead of needing to cut into our fence, we can cut into our MDF board, and that way we can cut our really shallow angle on the front or our shelves. Let's try it. Well, you want me to tell you what not to do when building shelves like this? I don't think it's a good idea to drill holes that are too deep, because then you'll end up with this. Incredibly annoying. I don't have any more of these ash boards, so I'll just have to figure out a way to fix this. Oh, and how fun. That also means that our threaded rods in the walls are all too long. So I guess I need to figure out some way to fix my little screw up here. And I've got a plan for that. I'm gonna use this plug cutter and cut a bunch of plugs out of this scrap piece of ash. I'm gonna, with a bunch of glue, hammer those plugs all the way through the hole until they stick out the bottom here. And then once the glue is set, we can plane it flat, sand it smooth, and hope that no one looks too closely at the underside of these shelves. Well, you know what? It's not perfect, but compared to the big holes that we had there a minute ago, it sure is a really big improvement. And I don't think they're gonna be super noticeable once they're on the wall and you're not looking for them. All right, so now onto these things, which all are just a little bit too long. That means that we get to screw all of them back out, chop off a little bit, and then screw them back in. Now onto the very last thing that we're gonna do before we can start attaching these to the wall. And that is gonna be doing something about the ends. Now, I don't think that the sides here look particularly nice. Ideally, I would like to have the same chamfer go on the sides here with a small radius in the corner. Now, I could try doing that on the table saw the same way I did this one, but standing this whole piece up on the side and trying to push it through just seems a little bit too sketchy for me. So, I'm gonna mark the side of the board here with the same height as the front edge, and then I'll mark the top here in the same distance as the depth of the chamfer. And now we've effectively marked what material we need to take off to make the same chamfer as we have on the front here. Now we're gonna do that the old-fashioned way with my hand plane. All right, so a bunch of planing and sanding later, we've got ourselves 3 completed shelves. Now I'm just gonna quickly give all of them a coat of oil, let that harden overnight, and then we can attach them to our wall. Guys, it's the morning after, the oil on these are dry, and now that the shells are finished, I have to say I'm really pleased with them. And even though you can spot where I had to fix them if you look closely, it is really not that bad, and I'm not that bothered by it. It's just a little reminder that things don't always go as planned. So let's attach these to the wall, which should just be a matter of aligning the holes and then slowly pushing them in towards the wall. Wow, how cool. Just look at how great the fit is on these. And wow, they are really surprisingly sturdy. Wow, that was easy. I guess if you get everything aligned super straight, it is much easier to slip them on the threaded rods. Last one with all of its 4 rods. Cool! Alright, so that's pretty much it. I've gone ahead and filled up my shelves with a bunch of stuff from my previous videos. Everything from the first planters I made until the ones I made out of Jesmonite, the Baby Yoda piggy bank, to the axe that I restored together with my buddy Anders, my Banzai animals, the knife that I made, and my 100,000 subscriber play button. By the way, thank you guys so much. We just hit 200,000 subscribers, so I just want to say thank you so much for watching my videos. I really hope you enjoyed watching this one. If you did, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell so you get notified every time I upload something new. As for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.